I stood in my kitchen staring at 3 tiers of perfection. Ivory fondant cascaded like silk. Sugar flowers I'd spent hours shaping by hand caught the afternoon light. 7 days. 7 days of measuring, baking, sculpting. My back ached. My fingers were stiff. But none of that mattered. This was my son's wedding cake. I heard his car in the driveway, and my heart lifted. Michael, my boy. Well, not a boy anymore, 29 now. Getting married. I smoothed my apron and opened the door before he could knock. "Mom," he said. Just that. Not even a smile. "Come see." I pulled him toward the kitchen. "I know you're going to love it." I added those little details you mentioned. The way Vanessa likes things elegant but not too. He stopped walking. His hand slipped from mine. The cake stood between us on the counter. This beautiful thing I'd poured my heart into. I waited for his face to light up the way it used to when I'd surprise him with his favorite cookies. After school. "It looks fine," he said. "Fine? Michael." I laughed nervously. "It's more than fine. It's perfect. I can't wait to see everyone's faces when they see it at the reception." "I'm so excited I can barely." He cut me off. His voice was flat. Cold. "You're not coming." I blinked. "What?" "To the wedding. You're not invited." The kitchen tilted. I gripped the counter. "This is a joke, right? Michael, I'm your mother. I made your wedding cake. How could I not be?" "Vanessa doesn't want you there," he said, already backing toward the door. "You'd make things awkward." "I'm sorry." He left. I stood there alone, staring at that beautiful cake, and something inside me crumbled into dust. Before continuing, if this story is touching your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to ring the notification bell, because every day I'm bringing you stories of women who turn their deepest pain into a new good way of living their lives. I don't know how long I stood there. The kitchen grew dim as the sun shifted. That cake sat there mocking me with its perfection. "You're not invited." Those 3 words kept echoing. I sank into the chair where Michael used to sit for breakfast, where I'd braided his hair when he was small and wanted to look like his favorite superhero, where we'd done homework together, his little tongue poking out in concentration as he learned to write his name. Michael James. I'd chosen those names carefully. Michael after my father. James after his father. God, I hadn't thought about Robert in years. He left when Michael was 3. Just walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. No note. No explanation. Just gone. I'd come home from my shift at the garment factory to find Michael sitting in his playpen, diaper soaking wet, screaming. Robert had left him alone for hours. I never let Michael know that part. I told him his daddy had to go away for work, that he loved him very much. Children deserve better than the truth sometimes. After Robert left, it was just us, me and my boy against the world. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. The garment factory during the day, cleaning offices at night, and on weekends I took in sewing. I altered wedding dresses in this very kitchen. Ironic, isn't it? I spent years making other people's wedding dreams come true, hemming silk and beading lace while Michael slept upstairs. My hands were always raw. I remember looking down at them one Christmas Eve. I was hand-stitching a bridesmaid dress, rushing to finish so I could buy Michael that bicycle he wanted, and I didn't recognize them anymore. They were red and calloused and old-looking. I was only 32, but when I saw his face Christmas morning, when he ran to that bike with a bow on it and screamed, "Mom, you're the best mom in the whole world," my hands didn't hurt anymore. Michael was such a sweet child, thoughtful. He'd make me cards from construction paper. He'd save half his Halloween candy to share with me. When I came home exhausted from double shifts, he'd pat the couch cushion next to him. "Sit down, Mama. Rest." We'd watch old movies together. He loved the musical ones. We'd sing along, his little voice cracking on the high notes. Both of us laughing until our sides hurt. This kitchen was our sanctuary. I taught him to bake here. My grandmother's recipes, the ones passed down through 3 generations. Chocolate cake with that secret ingredient nobody could ever guess. Lemon bars that melted on your tongue. Cinnamon rolls we'd make on Sunday mornings, the house filling with that warm spice smell. Michael loved helping. He'd stand on a step stool, flour dusting his nose, so serious about measuring everything perfectly. "You have to respect the recipe, Mama," he'd say, mimicking me. I can still see him there, gap-toothed grin, covered in batter. Those were good years. Hard, but good. I worked myself to exhaustion to get him into a good school. The public school in our neighborhood was falling apart. Teachers burned out. Kids falling through cracks. Michael deserved better. I found a private school across town. The tuition was impossible, but I took on extra alterations work. I stopped buying new clothes for myself. I wore the same 3 outfits for years, rotating them, mending them when they wore thin. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. I stopped going to the dentist, even when that back molar started aching. But Michael had new school uniforms. Michael had textbooks. Michael had a future. He thrived there, on a roll every semester. He played soccer. I never missed a game, even when I had to leave work early and lose pay. I'd stand on the sidelines in my cleaning company uniform, cheering until my voice was hoarse. The other mothers would look at me sometimes. I could feel their judgment, their designer athleisure, their expensive sunglasses. I didn't care. I wasn't there for them. When Michael got accepted to college, I cried for an hour. Full scholarship. My baby was going to college. First person in our family ever. I helped him pack for freshman year. He was nervous, trying not to show it. I slipped a photo into his suitcase, the 2 of us at his high school graduation, his arm around me, both of us grinning. "Don't forget where you came from," I'd joked. "Never, Mama," he'd said, hugging me tight. "Never." He came home every holiday that first year. We'd bake together like old times. He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, his dreams. He wanted to be an architect, build things that would last. I was so proud. Then he met Vanessa. It was his junior year. He brought her home for Thanksgiving. I'd spent days preparing, wanting everything perfect. I cleaned until the house sparkled. I made turkey and all the fixings, even though it stretched my budget to breaking. Vanessa walked in wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked around my small living room like she was touring a museum of poverty. Her smile was thin and never reached her eyes. "What a quaint little place," she'd said. Quaint. That word stuck with me. She barely touched the food I'd made. She checked her phone constantly. When Michael showed her his old room, the one I'd kept exactly the same, she laughed. "You actually grew up here?" Something changed in Michael after that visit. He started making excuses. "Can't make it home for spring break, Mom. Too much studying." Christmas was at Vanessa's parents' place. He went there instead. "Maybe next year," he'd said. Next year came and went. Then another. When my mother-in-law passed 6 months ago, Michael came to the funeral. He'd inherited money from her for $100,000. She'd been saving it for years, wanting him to have a good start in life. I was happy for him. He deserved it. He'd worked hard. That was the last time I'd seen him, until 2 weeks ago, when he called. "Mom," he'd said, and my heart had soared at hearing his voice. I need to ask you something. Will you make my wedding cake? Of course, I'd said immediately. Of course, sweetheart. I'd be honored. We'd talked for an hour, like old times. He told me Vanessa's favorite flowers, her color scheme, how many guests they were expecting. 200, he'd said. It's going to be big, Mom. Really big. I'd been so happy. He was including me. He wanted me to be part of his special day. This was my way back into his life. I'd spent every penny I had on ingredients. The finest butter, Madagascar vanilla, Belgian chocolate. I'd borrowed Dorothy's cake stand. I'd watched YouTube tutorials late into the night, learning new techniques. 7 days I worked on that cake. My back screamed. My hands cramped. I'd burned myself twice on the oven. I didn't care. This was for my son. This was love made visible. And now, sitting in this kitchen in the growing darkness, I understood the truth. He hadn't called because he wanted to reconnect. He'd called because he needed something. And once I'd served my purpose, I was disposable. Just like his father had decided I was disposable 26 years ago. I looked at that beautiful cake sitting there in the shadows. All that work, all that love, all those years of sacrifice. For what? I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the scene in my head, searching for the moment I'd misunderstood, searching for the part where this was all a terrible mistake. But Michael's face had been clear, cold, final. You're not invited. The next morning, Dorothy knocked on my door. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. Oh, honey, she said, you look like you haven't slept in a week. I told her everything. The words came out in a rush, tangled with tears I'd been holding back all night. Dorothy listened, her face growing harder with each sentence. That ungrateful boy, she finally said. After everything you've done for him, he's confused. I heard myself defending him. Vanessa must have pressured him. He wouldn't do this on his own. He's not cruel. Dorothy made us tea. We sat at my kitchen table, that wedding cake still sitting on the counter like an accusation. I couldn't bring myself to move it. I need to tell you something, Dorothy said carefully. I saw Vanessa last week, at that fancy cafe downtown. You know, the one with the $15 lattes. I nodded, waiting. She was with 3 other women. Same type. Designer everything. Those huge sunglasses, you know. I was there picking up coffee for my daughter, and I heard them talking. They were loud, laughing. Dorothy paused, her fingers tight around her mug. Go on, I said quietly. One of them asked about the wedding. Vanessa started talking about Michael. She said Dorothy looked pained. She said she was training him properly. Those were her exact words. Training him like a dog. My stomach turned. She said his mother was a social liability. That she couldn't have some poor seamstress embarrassing her in front of her family's friends. She called you that poor woman. She said Michael needed to cut ties completely if he wanted to be part of her world. Each word was a knife. But Dorothy wasn't finished. There's more, she said. One of the friends asked if she really loved him. Vanessa laughed. She said, and I quote, I love his inheritance. $400,000 is a very attractive quality in a man. The room spun. She's after his grandmother's money, Dorothy said. That's all she wants. That's all this has ever been about. I thought about Michael's grandmother, sweet Margaret. She'd worked as a nurse for 40 years, saving every penny. She lived modestly, in a small apartment, wearing the same coat for 20 winters. Also, she could leave something to her only grandson, so he could have opportunities she never had. And Vanessa was going to take it all. I have to tell him, I said, standing up. He needs to know what kind of person she really is. Dorothy grabbed my hand. Do you think he'll believe you? He already chose her over you. If you come to him with this now, he'll think you're just a bitter mother trying to ruin his happiness. So what do? I asked. Just let her destroy him? We sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, someone's dog barked. Then something shifted in me. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'm going to that wedding, I said. Dorothy blinked. But he said. I know what he said. But I'm his mother. I have a right to see my only son get married. And someone needs to witness what kind of family he's marrying into. How will you even get in? They'll have a guest list. I thought about that. Then I remembered something Michael had mentioned during our phone call. The wedding was at the Montgomery estate, Vanessa's family home. I'm going to write to her father, I said. Dorothy looked skeptical. You think he'll help you? I don't know, I admitted. But Michael said something once about Vanessa's father being old-fashioned, traditional, the kind of man who values family and respect. Maybe if I appeal to him, explain the situation with dignity, he'll understand. It's a long shot, Dorothy said. It's the only shot I have. That afternoon, I sat down and wrote the most important letter of my life. I didn't plead. I didn't beg. I simply told the truth. Dear Mr. Montgomery, I began. My name is Michael's mother. You don't know me, and I suspect your daughter has ensured you never would. I'm writing to you because I believe you're a man who values truth and family. And there's something you should know. I told him about raising Michael alone, about the sacrifices, not to gain sympathy, but to show what kind of son he'd raised. I told him about the phone call, the cake, the cruel dismissal. I told him what Dorothy had overheard at the cafe. I'm not writing to cause trouble, I concluded. I'm writing because I believe Michael is making a terrible mistake, influenced by someone who doesn't love him, only his inheritance from his grandmother. If you're the man I hope you are, you'll want to know the truth about who your daughter really is. I don't ask for an invitation to the wedding. I only ask that you consider whether this marriage is built on the values your family holds dear. I mailed it that evening. 3 days passed with no response. I assumed he'd ignored it, thrown it away, maybe. Why would a wealthy man like Richard Montgomery care about the pleas of a poor seamstress? Then, on the 4th day, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Michael's mother? The voice was deep, measured, educated. Yes, I said carefully. This is Richard Montgomery. I received your letter. My heart hammered. I want you to know something, he continued. I've always prided myself on being a good judge of character, but your letter made me realize I may have failed in the most important judgment of all, my own daughter's character. Mr. Montgomery, please, let me finish. I've been watching Vanessa closely since reading your words. I've asked questions, discreet questions. What I've discovered disturbs me deeply. This isn't the first time she's pursued a man for financial gain. I closed my eyes, vindication and sorrow mixing together. There was a young man 3 years ago, Richard continued, from a good family. She convinced him to invest his trust fund in a business venture of hers. When it failed, and it failed spectacularly, she broke off the engagement and moved on. His family lost everything. I only learned about this yesterday. She'd hidden it from me. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be. You did me a service. You showed me I've been blind. Now, here's what's going to happen. You will attend this wedding. I'm adding your name to the guest list personally. You'll sit with my family, and you'll watch as I toast my daughter and her new husband. Before we continue, Make sure to like this video and subscribe. With your support, we can keep bringing more stories from powerful women that touch the heart of all of us. I don't understand, I said to Richard. You will, he replied. Trust me. And bring that cake you made. I've arranged for it to be displayed prominently. Your work should be seen. But Vanessa, leave Vanessa to me. She's underestimated both of us. That ends Saturday. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone, my hands shaking. Dorothy, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation, stared at me with wide eyes. What just happened? She asked. I think, I said slowly, justice is about to be served. The next 3 days crawled by. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I pulled out the one good dress I owned, my mother's vintage navy dress from the 1960s. I'd kept it all these years, dry cleaned and preserved. It was simple, elegant, timeless. The kind of dress that spoke of dignity and grace. I altered it slightly to fit better. My seamstress hands remembered the work even though they trembled. Dorothy helped me with my hair the morning of the wedding. She pinned it up in a classic style, soft but sophisticated. You look beautiful, she said. I looked terrified, I replied. You look strong, she corrected. And that's what matters. I loaded the wedding cake carefully into my car. Each tier secured, each sugar flower still perfect. This cake had caused so much pain, but it was also a testament to love. To what I was capable of creating with these scarred, work-worn hands. As I drove toward Greenwich, toward the Montgomery estate, toward whatever awaited me there, I thought about Margaret, Michael's grandmother. She'd been a fighter, a survivor. She'd worked night shifts for decades, helping people, healing people, saving every penny for a grandson she loved. This is for you too, Margaret, I whispered. Your money won't be stolen. Not if I can help it. The Montgomery estate rose before me like something from a movie. Columns and gardens and a massive white tent. Luxury cars lined the circular drive. Women in expensive gowns. Men in tailored suits. I parked my 15-year-old Honda between a Mercedes and a BMW. And I walked toward my son's wedding like I had every right to be there. Because I did. The moment I stepped out of my car, I felt eyes on me. Women in Chanel suits turned to stare. Men in tuxedos appraised me with barely concealed curiosity. My mother's vintage navy dress suddenly felt like armor. I lifted my chin and walked toward the entrance. A young man with a clipboard stood at the gate, checking names. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Name please, he asked, not looking up. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, a deep voice called out from behind him. She's with me. Richard Montgomery appeared, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. He was tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit and looked at me with eyes that were both kind and sharp. Mr. Montgomery, I said quietly, please, call me Richard. He extended his arm. May I escort you? I took it, feeling the whispers erupt around us. Who was this woman arriving with the father of the bride? We walked through manicured gardens toward the massive white tent. Inside, everything was white and gold and crystal. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Round tables with elaborate centerpieces. A string quartet played softly in the corner. It was the most beautiful wedding setup I'd ever seen, and the most cold. Richard guided me to a table at the front, right next to the head table where Michael and Vanessa would sit. Several well-dressed people were already seated there, clearly family members. They looked at me with polite confusion. Everyone, Richard said smoothly. This is a very special guest of mine. Michael's mother. She'll be sitting with us today. The confusion turned to shock, then quick recovery. They greeted me warmly, though I could see the questions in their eyes. Where had I been? Why hadn't they met me before? Richard leaned close and whispered, "Your cake is being brought in now. It will be placed right next to the commercial one Vanessa ordered. Let's see which one draws more attention." I looked toward the cake table and gasped. There sat a massive, elaborate cake, 5 tiers of white fondant with gold leaf and cascading orchids. It screamed expensive. Beside it, staff were carefully placing my 3-tier cake. Mine looked simple in comparison, modest, but it also looked handmade, personal, filled with love. You could see the difference immediately. Guests began filling the tent. The string quartet swelled into the processional music. Everyone stood, and then I saw him. Michael walked down the aisle with the officiant, taking his place at the altar. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but there was something tight in his expression, nervous. He was scanning the crowd, smiling at people, playing his part. Then his eyes found me. The color drained from his face. He actually stumbled, catching himself on the best man's arm. I watched him mouth something that looked like no, but there was nothing he could do. The bridesmaids were already coming down the aisle in their blush-colored gowns. The music changed. Everyone turned. Vanessa appeared. I had to admit, she was beautiful. Her dress probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. White silk, beaded bodice, a train that went on forever. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves under a cathedral veil. She looked like a princess, but her eyes were as cold as ever. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, and I saw Richard's face. He was playing his part, the proud father. But there was something else there, something that made me sit up straighter. The ceremony began. I barely heard the words. I kept watching Michael, who kept glancing at me with an expression that mixed panic and anger, and something else. Shame, maybe. The officiant asked if anyone objected to this union. Silence. Richard squeezed my hand under the table, as if to say, "Not yet. Wait." They said their vows. Michael's voice cracked. Vanessa's was clear and confident. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. It was done. Michael kissed his new bride, and everyone applauded. I clapped too, each movement mechanical. They walked back down the aisle together. Vanessa's smile radiant, Michael's smile strained. The reception began immediately. Music started. Waiters appeared with champagne. Michael and Vanessa made their way to the head table, right next to where I sat. Vanessa saw me first. Her expression transformed from joy to fury in an instant. "What is she doing here?" she hissed at Michael. Michael looked at his father-in-law. Richard just smiled calmly and raised his champagne glass. "I invited her," Richard said simply. "She's the groom's mother. Where else would she be?" Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. She turned to Michael. "You told me you handled this. You said she wouldn't be a problem." Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Hurt, maybe, that she'd speak about me like an obstacle to be handled. "She made the cake," I said quietly, gesturing to the table. "The small one. The one made with love instead of money." Several guests nearby heard me and looked at both cakes with renewed interest. I could hear the murmurs. "Oh, that's sweet. The groom's mother made one. How lovely. So personal." Vanessa's face turned red. "That wasn't supposed to be displayed. I ordered a cake from the best bakery in Connecticut. And yet both are here," Richard said. "Isn't that fortunate? Now everyone can see the difference between what money buys and what love creates." The tension at the table was suffocating. Michael hadn't said a word to me. He just stared at his plate. Dinner was served. I couldn't taste any of it. Around us, the party continued, laughter, dancing, toasts from the best man and maid of honor. All the traditional wedding festivities. But our table was an island of awkward silence. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Richard stood, tapping his glass. The tent fell silent. Everyone turned to face the father of the bride. "Good evening, everyone," Richard began, his voice carrying easily. "What a beautiful celebration this is. My daughter's wedding day. A father's dream, they say, to see his child married." Vanessa smiled, preening under the attention. But Richard's expression shifted slightly. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what makes a marriage work. What makes a partnership real? And I've realized it comes down to one thing: knowing why you're really there." He paused. The tent was completely silent now. Marriage should be built on love, on respect, on partnership. It should be about two people choosing each other for who they are, not what they have. I felt my pulse quicken. Vanessa's smile was frozen. "So I want to share something with all of you," Richard continued. "Something I learned this week that broke my heart. You see, I discovered that my daughter has a pattern I was blind to until someone brave enough wrote me a letter." He pulled out my letter from his jacket pocket. Vanessa went white. "This letter came from Michael's mother, the woman sitting right here, who raised her son alone, who worked herself to exhaustion to give him every opportunity, who spent a week making that beautiful cake over there with her own hands. And you know what she told me? She told me she wasn't invited to this wedding, that my daughter had convinced her new husband to exclude his own mother, because she was an embarrassment." Gasps rippled through the tent. All eyes turned to me, then to Vanessa, then to Michael. Michael looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "But that's not all I learned," Richard continued, his voice harder now. "I also learned that this isn't the first time Vanessa has pursued a man for financial gain. 3 years ago, there was another young man, another engagement, another trust fund. When that money disappeared, so did my daughter's interest." Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "Daddy, stop it. You're embarrassing me." "No, dear. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed this family. And you broke the heart of a good woman who did nothing but love her son." Richard turned to Michael, and his expression softened slightly with pity. "Son, I'm sorry to do this at your wedding, but someone has to tell you the truth. Your wife, and yes, she's your wife now, legally married you for your grandmother's inheritance. $400,000. She told her friends at a cafe downtown. She called it your most attractive quality." The tent erupted. People were talking over each other. Vanessa was screaming, "No, that's not true. He's lying." But Richard kept going. "I've spent this week investigating. I've talked to her previous fiance's family. I've reviewed her bank statements, which I have access to as her father. I've seen the pattern clear as day, and I will not let it continue with my family name attached to it." He turned to the crowd. "Effective immediately, Vanessa is cut off from the Montgomery Family Trust. She will receive no inheritance, no support, no access to family money. If she stays in this marriage, she'll stay as herself with nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. She turned on Michael, all pretense gone. "This is your fault. You were supposed to keep that woman away from here. You said you'd handle her." Michael finally found his voice. I thought you loved me." Vanessa laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. "Loved you? Michael, look at yourself. You're nobody. You were nobody until your grandmother died and left you that money. That's the only reason I stayed with you, Did you really think someone like me would end up with someone like you otherwise? The words landed like physical blows. I watched my son's face crumble. And your mother, Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with venom. God, she's pathetic. That sad little cake. That cheap dress. Everything about her screams poverty and failure. I would have died before letting her near my wedding photos. She turned to me then, her eyes full of hate. You should have stayed in your little hovel where you belong. Michael doesn't need you. He doesn't want you. He's ashamed of you. Something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly, calmly. Every eye in that tent was on me. I looked at Vanessa, this cruel, beautiful girl who'd stolen my son, and I spoke clearly. You know what I see when I look at you, I said. I see someone who'll never know what real love is. Because real love isn't pretty dresses and expensive parties. Real love is staying up all night when your child is sick. It's working 3 jobs so he can have opportunities you never had. It's making a cake with arthritic hands because you want his day to be special. You'll never know that kind of love. And that makes you the poorest person here. I turned to Michael. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face. I'll always be your mother, I said softly. When you're ready to remember who you really are, I'll be at home. The same home where I raised you, where I taught you that people matter more than money. Then I walked out of that tent with my head high, leaving behind my beautiful cake, my ungrateful son, and his terrible new wife. Behind me, I heard chaos erupt, Vanessa screaming, guests talking, Michael calling out. But I didn't look back. I'd said what needed to be said. Now the rest was up to him. 3 months passed like a slow healing wound. Dorothy checked on me every day those first weeks. She'd bring soup, sit with me in silence, let me cry when I needed to. The story had spread through our neighborhood, then somehow beyond. People I barely knew would stop me at the grocery store to tell me how brave I'd been. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. The wedding cake table had been photographed by guests before everything fell apart. Someone posted it online. My simple 3-tier cake next to Vanessa's ostentatious 5-tier monstrosity. The caption read, "Guess which one was made with love?" It went viral. Thousands of comments. Millions of views. People sharing their own stories of ungrateful children, manipulative in-laws, sacrificed mothers. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted my son back. Richard Montgomery called me twice. Once to apologize for the public nature of the confrontation. I told him he'd done the right thing. Michael needed to see the truth, even if it destroyed him. The second time, he called to tell me that Vanessa had filed for an annulment within 48 hours of the wedding. She'd moved back to her parents' house, hired a vicious lawyer, and was fighting for a share of Michael's inheritance despite the marriage lasting less than a day. She won't get it, Richard assured me. I'm personally funding Michael's legal defense. It's the least I can do. I raised that woman. Her cruelty is partly my failure. I told him that wasn't true, but I understood his guilt. I carried my own. I went back to work, back to my sewing machine, my alterations, my quiet life. But something had shifted in me. I'd spent decades defining myself by motherhood, by sacrifice. Now I had to remember who I was underneath all that. I started baking again, not for anyone else, just for me. Dorothy and I would sit at my kitchen table with coffee and whatever I'd made that day. We'd talk about everything and nothing. Those afternoons kept me sane. I donated the wedding cake to St. Catherine's shelter, just like I'd planned. The director called me, crying, saying it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. They'd served it at a community dinner. People had seconds. Children had smiled. Good, I'd said. That's what love is supposed to do. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Michael standing on my porch. He looked terrible. Thin, dark circles under his eyes. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. But his eyes were the same eyes I remembered from his childhood. Vulnerable. Scared. Sorry. "Hi, Mom," he whispered. We stood there for a long moment. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But the larger part, the mother part, just wanted to hold him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd made cookies together, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd fed him breakfast before school for 18 years. "I don't know where to start," he said finally. "The beginning is usually good," I replied. And he told me everything. How Vanessa had slowly isolated him from me. How she'd made comments about my house, my clothes, my life. How she'd convinced him that to be successful, to fit into her world, he needed to distance himself from his past. From me. "I believed her," he said, his voice breaking. "I believed her when she said you'd be happier not attending the wedding. That it would be too overwhelming for you. That you'd feel out of place. I convinced myself I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself," I said quietly, "from being embarrassed by your poor mother." He flinched. "You're right. God, Mom, you're right. I was ashamed. And I hate myself for it." Tears ran down his face. I'd never seen him cry like this, not since he was a child. "She took everything," he continued. "The inheritance is gone. Legal fees, the wedding, things she convinced me to buy. I have maybe 20,000 left. I lost my job because I couldn't focus. I'm living in a studio apartment in a bad part of town. Everything I thought I wanted, everything I thought made me successful, it's all gone." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "And you know what the worst part is? I deserve it. I deserve all of it. I threw away the one person who actually loved me. For what? For a woman who saw me as a bank account. For a life that was never real." I sat quietly, letting him finish. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were right about everything, and I was too blind and stupid to see it." The clock ticked. Outside, leaves skittered across the porch. "Michael," I said finally, "I'm your mother. I'll always love you. Nothing you do can change that. But love and trust are different things. You broke my heart. You chose cruelty over compassion. You need to understand that this doesn't just go away because you're sorry." "I know," he whispered. "If you want to rebuild our relationship, it happens slowly. Through actions, not words. You show me you've learned. You show me you remember where you came from and why that matters." "I will," he said. "I promise. However long it takes." I reached across the table and took his hand. His skin was cold. "I'll make us some coffee," I said. "And you can tell me how you've really been." Something loosened in his face. Relief. Hope. Fear. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. Really talked. He told me about his mistakes, his regrets, his plans to rebuild his life differently this time, with real values, real priorities. When he left, we hugged on the porch. It wasn't the same as before. Too much had broken, but it was a beginning. I watched him drive away in his beat-up old car. The Mercedes was long gone, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Michael had a long road ahead of him. So did I, learning to trust again, learning to forgive without forgetting, but we'd taken the first step. And sometimes, that's all healing is. One small step, then another, then another. I went back inside and looked at my kitchen. This room that had seen so much, so many meals, so many memories, so much love. I pulled out my grandmother's recipe book. The pages were stained and worn. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, instructions passed down through generations. Then I started baking. Not for Michael, not for anyone else, just for me. Because I'd finally remembered something important, something I'd forgotten in all those years of sacrifice and service. I mattered too. My love was valuable. Yes, but I was valuable even without giving it away. The house filled with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. I looked out the window at the autumn afternoon, at leaves falling and gathering in golden piles. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. If this story moved you, click on the next video that's appearing on the screen now. I'm sure you'll be surprised by this new emotional and heartbreaking story I have right here to tell you.